You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Data Center Therapy, a podcast from Ivoxy Consulting that talks all things IT with a healthy dose of empathy. I am your host, Matt Yette, and alongside me today again is my co-host, Mr. Matt Cozzolino.
Hello, everyone.
Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty great. How are you?
I'm great. I'm feeling still slightly insecure. Topical, inside joke thing. Well, if y'all have been listening to the pod recently, the last couple 3 weeks, Matt and I have really been focusing on the security side of things. It's so tough it's something we have to be delicate about. Pardon me, as consultants. I think a lot of times you're unfairly painted as fearmongers, doom and gloom, FUD, whatever you want to call it, and you can't run around saying your hair's on fire all the time and be taken seriously, because eventually you'll get proven wrong and, Chicken Little and all of that. But security, ransomware, it's absolutely applicable to everybody, no matter how. It's more like a matter of when you will be attacked and not if. And it all comes down to the fact that the data is important to you, not necessarily anybody else. But if I can keep the data from you, Matt, if I can lock you out of your house, I don't care what's in your house, but if I can lock you out of it, that's still pretty valuable to you that you have that loss.
We've created a value, like you just said, yeah.
Right, and then there's no fencing, right? There's no turning around. I don't have to sell anything. I don't have to get it onto the pawn shop, blah, 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 blah. It's just give me money to have it back. So that's what we've really been focusing a lot on. And one key component and a very key partner of ours, going back to the inception of Ivoxy, I mean, we started with training classes on what is this cool virtualization thing, and VMware was the trailblazer in that aspect. And so we've managed to maintain a great relationship with them. And of course, VMware is a lot more than just a hypervisor nowadays, right? So we brought on John Nelson. Yeah, John is a global field principal solution engineer for VMware, and it's focused obviously on the security team, the security business unit at VMware. So John, after that long-winded welcome.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you arrived where you are right now?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So I came to VMware in the acquisition of Carbon Black. And so I've been at VMware Carbon Black for a little over 4 years. But I come from kind of a non-traditional background in this space. So before Carbon Black, I was at RSA, and that's where I started as a solution engineer late in life. Before RSA, I was teaching for the government outside of Baltimore at all the secret squirrel agencies, teaching computer forensics, network investigations, and malware analysis. And prior to that, I retired from the Pennsylvania State Police as a corporal and had conducted computer crime investigations for them for over 13 years. So more of a practitioner than a solution engineer, but my teaching background and my investigative background kind of lends itself very well to this role. So welcome to my working retirement.
Wow. Yeah, Kaz, I'm starting to get nervous. A few episodes ago, we had Cisco's, one of their lead investigators for their counterfeit product unit. And I'm starting to feel like we're getting a little too close to the G-men here, Kaz. I don't know. Like, I should have used an alias on this episode.
I half expected John to show up in a suit, with a black suit and a tie,
with the what do they call it? The memory eraser?
There you go. One of those. Here, look right here. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this is, were you at Carbon Black when it was acquired, or were you at VMware?
No, I was at Carbon Black. Yeah.
There you go. I was going to say 4 years is right around that time.
Yeah. I was at Carbon Black. I think it was about 2 years, maybe 2 years. I think it was until we got acquired. But I had started in New York City and covering the big financials out there, and then I grew up in the Bay Area. And so, the state police kept me anchored to the East Coast, and I begged and pleaded with my wife to allow me to come back to the West Coast, and she was nice enough not to divorce me and come with me.
Oh, that's good.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, antivirus and in that area, when you think about protection, I mean, it's no longer just antivirus is such an antiquated term at this point, but that's kind of the crucible that all this has been born out of. The malware, anti-bad behavior, make sure everything on my computer really is not doing these nefarious things. So from a Carbon Black standpoint, we're dealing with ransomware now. That's really the big danger, and not so much somebody's going to delete my files, because I can't pay to get my deleted files back. I can pay to get my. So where does Carbon Black fit into all this? Is this just another antivirus software, whether that's Avast or Kaspersky or McAfee or Sofo? Take your pick. Is this just a more modern version, or is there some delta between that when it comes to the capabilities and the approach?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, because the technology, or part of our technology, has been referred to as next-gen antivirus. And because antivirus is in that name, people think exactly that. Oh, this is
kind of
just
some connotations or some stuff that comes along with that, yeah.
Exactly, right. There's too much baggage from that term. And so, no, we are not antivirus in the traditional sense of the word. Although we do use signatures, because why not catch the low-hanging fruit, right? Just weed out that garbage, the ankle biters, get rid of them. But we go above and beyond that. So outside of just the signatures, we also do some machine learning, which is realistically automated static analysis of binaries.
Good for you. Thank you. Just by the way, I'm not saying machine learning is bad, but thank you for just being honest about, look,
what that means.
This is statistical analysis, heuristics, etc. It's not a bad thing. It's just fancy new word. Okay, we do not have a marketing guy on the line today, Matt. This is great.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that run natively on each one of the machines, or is that kind of like an aggregate across the entire?
No, that's being run on the sensor itself on the endpoint.
Okay, so my statistical analysis might be slightly different than a different machine, that kind of a thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's because it's not looking at your machine, it's looking at the binaries. So it's saying, okay, here's a binary I haven't seen before. Let me do this analysis on it. So it's looking at like the metadata in the header of the binary. It's looking at strings, and it's doing an analysis based upon that to say whether or not it believes that it could be malware. We also have a really tight integration with AMSI in the Windows world. So that gives us the ability to look inside of interactive shells, to be able to deobfuscate command line arguments that maybe are obfuscated in, say, base64. And we can look inside of all that and create detections and preventions that happen on the fly as soon as we see that activity on the endpoint. And so there are a bunch of rules that are pushed out to the sensor and these are very highly efficacious rules. Our threat analytics unit looks at all the data that we collect, and it's petabytes and petabytes of data a day across all of our customers. And so we look at the anonymized data and test out these detections across all that data. And so we can make these really strong detections that have a very, very low false positive rate, if false positive at all. And so we can push these out to all our customers, and we get these blocks right on the endpoint.
So you can get more zero-day effectiveness too with that centralized and then back down.
Yeah, exactly. And so then on top of that, we also have behavioral analysis. Now, all the behavioral analysis is up in the cloud, because we don't want to try to do that on the endpoint, because then everybody's endpoint, crashes and burns. Yeah. Right. And that's
the old Norton effect.
Exactly. That's a huge problem with traditional antivirus, because, like with this behavioral analysis, we push it all up in the cloud, so you get near real-time detections based upon the behavioral analytics. Also, we apply these plain English tags called TTPs, or techniques and procedures, along with MITRE TIDs So we apply all these tags to the events that we see. And so it adds a great deal of context to the picture. But we are not doing this in the way that traditional antivirus is doing it. We do not scan endpoints. We don't do scheduled scans. We just don't do that. What we do is we monitor what's happening on the endpoint. We monitor all process execution, and we see what it's doing, and we can block things pre-execution, mid-execution, post-execution. The entire execution lifecycle, we can take action against a malicious process anywhere in there.
And so, since you've looked at every path of execution, there is no point in scheduled scans, because if you've missed it, you've missed it. That scheduled scan would not pick anything different up, because those same detection routines are run real time on execution. So there's no point in hammering it. I also like the attention to the efficiency of the process, because especially in the virtualized world or VDI world, right? You take great pains to make sure your AV solution, and I say AV just in general, you make sure that endpoint solution doesn't scan or is very lightweight, because take your workstation, big deal. It doesn't affect anybody else. But you are all noisy neighbors if everybody starts that scheduled scan on your SAN, your ESXi host, etc.
Absolutely.
So you're looking for things like Word or Excel isn't supposed to be necessarily calling a network stack and then asking for DNS queries out to. You're looking for stuff like that as far as what the application's doing and how it's behaving. Is that?
Yeah, I mean we're literally looking at everything that it's doing. So we're looking at, is it writing things to the file system? So we can pick up if it drops malware onto the file system. We're looking at network connections, inbound and outbound. We're looking at registry modifications. We're looking at how processes interact with other processes' memory space. And we're looking at everything that it's doing. So like, you go do a scheduled scan on an endpoint and it finds no malware, but you still have PowerShell and maybe Python sitting on there. And if an attacker can leverage those things, they could do very nasty things to those endpoints. And PowerShell and Python are always going to be allow listed in a customer's environment.
Because we're going to use them. Yeah.
Right. Because IT shops need them, security practitioners need them. Right, exactly. So you need to be able to watch those things and see exactly what they're doing to prevent all the bad stuff from happening. And so but
that also makes it sound like you guys, because of the anonymized data, the scrub data collected, you can say, we know that Office 2016 version this behaves this way. Not because you went in and said, okay, Microsoft, what's this do? But it's just because you analyze all of these installs, you thumbprint, and now you have an expected behavior pattern for basically any binary that's installed on, well, at least one computer, but to everybody's benefit, all the computers that have that binary. If somebody steps out of line in a really weird way, that's going to be an anomaly, and away you go. I like that.
Yeah, that's true to a certain extent. I mean, every customer's environment is unique and into it of itself. They only, people will use products in different ways and do different things with it. So there's only so much baselining you can do from a global perspective. You still
this file path is different than that. Who cares? It's a different customer.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. But it really gets down to how they're using it. And so, like we can create policies that work for one customer, but don't necessarily work for another customer. And we have a really cool mechanism in the product where before you turn on a policy action, you can actually click a test button and it will look in their environment and say,
oh, that's nice.
Yeah, is this gonna set the world on fire, or is this gonna do exactly what we want it to do? And so you can look and see, oh, there's all these false positives. Okay, let's look at how we can tune this to still be able to turn this on, but not have these false positives. And then we were able to not go and impact the business negatively by, wincing and pressing a button.
Oof. I run a utility on some of my public-facing web servers in a colo Kaz and I share called Fail to Ban. And it's a Linux utility that basically you tell it to keep an eye on that log file. So typically it'd be like your Apache or Nginx log file. And then it's got it's basically a regex rule that says look for these strings and look for these things, and you can add things on. And then you can say, if it triggers, do this, and it's an action. And that usually puts them in jail for a certain amount of time, that it unbans them. But it interacts with typically like firewall-D or an IP tables under the covers. And there is a debug, like what if kind of thing. And I can only imagine testing that out and having it. And then it bans a /8 and you're all done. You can't even talk to the server. Oops. Yeah. So, yeah, I love the what if I click this button feature. That's nice.
Yeah, do you have power users that end up being harder to deal with? So the reason I ask that is a lot of times we do, like, I look at what I do with PowerShell or scripting or through the command line. I'm like, you know what, that I could see how that would be seen as a antivirus or something, because I'm going out and touching 20 machines all at once with one command. Is that something you run into fairly often? Like the power users that are actually doing that kind of work get miscategorized? Is there something different that a script or a virus or a locker would do?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, there are users and or applications that do things that are malware-like. They're not malicious activities, but they look and feel like malware. And so, when you are looking for a security product, you want to find something that gives you the granular control to adapt to those things that you encounter. Because if what you are left with is, I got to turn off this entire section of prevention capability to account for this false positive that I'm seeing, you're just making yourself less secure. So you want a tool that enables you to go in and say, okay, this group of computers is for our devs, and so every time they run, GCC and they're dropping all these new binaries on and all the binaries get blocked, that's just a big pain.
That's a workflow.
Exactly. But it's when you start looking at all these new binaries, they don't have a reputation. We don't know what they are. So depending upon what policy they're in and the settings, they could get blocked. Well, we have mechanisms in the product to look at things like, we can allow lists based on certificate or hash or path. And so we can set it up and say, or even by application. So like with GCC, we can say, okay, anything that GCC drops on the file system, we're going to give it a mid-level reputation that says, we're going to let you run, but we're going to still keep an eye on you to make sure that some attacker didn't use GCC to compile a malicious application on the endpoint and start trying to run that. So we can use these mechanisms to account for things that on its face seem malicious, but in actuality are not. And we can get really granular in the control of them.
It's so funny you said that, John. I promise to the listeners out there, we did not precede John with any of this information. I had a call with a customer of ours 2 days ago where we talked about, at endpoints, at least an endpoint protection baseline to then get arms around a better security posture. And one of the bullet points from the customer was the management console / means of configuring the granularity of the protection, where it's not one size fits all, that we can say these particular users can have a different set of scrutiny, basically, parameters, and still, not have to whitelist it for the entire organization. That was a requirement. And so when we talked to VMware, let's bring this up. So I promise we didn't feed you on that, but you just answered that question, which was awesome.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to read your mind.
I guess that also kind of talks to the...
You are from the government.
Workflow.
You've got
and I'm here to help.
You left your foil hat off today, Matt.
Right? I propose. Well, the inside is lined with tinfoil. That's what you don't see.
There you
but
go.
Apparently, it doesn't work over Zoom.
There you go. You got that filter on. So, well, it sounds like that would also speak to like workflow, right? So if I've got an appropriate workflow where I'm going to push these changes, push this stuff out to my dev group, I can break that and pick up the signatures and see the files and whitelist them and or say this is okay before I then go move on to production and have it break there or have it
absolutely
block something there, right? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And the really nice thing, another really nice thing about Carbon Black is that you can create any number of policies that you want. So you can, and people do use our policies to logically group their endpoints, whether it is by job function or by geolocation, whatever. You can group your endpoints so that you can become a company that is the most secure without negatively impacting the business. Because at the end of the day, all our customers are trying to make money, and we can't impact their ability to make money, but we need to help them be as secure as possible.
Right. Well, that makes sense.
So I'm a VMware customer, right? And obviously that has started at its foundation with vSphere, ESX, and vCenter, and now maybe I run Horizon View for desktops. And so past being certainly a replacement, an alternative, a better version of what we typically think of when we think of endpoint protection, right? How does Carbon Black kind of expand beyond that? How does it fold in with other VMware technologies, both now and down the line with future acquisitions, future integrations, and things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Carbon Black is much more than just a next-gen AV product. Carbon Black, or the Carbon Black Cloud, is a platform that has a multitude of services on there. We have next-gen AV, which also has USB mass storage device control. We have enterprise EDR, which is for enterprise SOCs, who are primarily doing proactive hunting 24/7. They can create all the custom detections that they want. It's a super powerful tool, and we invented the EDR market with that product, but we brought it into our cloud. We have container security. Currently, we're doing compliance governance and image scanning, and we're bringing to the table runtime protection as well. We also do vulnerability management, so vulnerabilities on the endpoints and also vulnerabilities in your virtualized workloads. And then finally, we have a tool called audit and remediation, and it's a Tanium-like product based on Facebook's product or open source project OS Query. And so you can do real-time queries across your entire infrastructure using over 2,000 different individual attributes. It's a really powerful tool to really solve a multitude of use cases. Now, all these products on top of the Carbon Black Cloud, we are bringing together into the rest of the VMware portfolio. Currently, we integrate with Workspace ONE. So Workspace ONE is a endpoint management or a device management platform. Also helps with access and security. And so our integration with Workspace ONE, you're managing your endpoints with Workspace ONE, and we're sending telemetry into Workspace ONE. And so if Workspace ONE sees a ransomware attack, it can quarantine that endpoint automatically. And so when it quarantines it, it removes it from the network, and the only thing that it can communicate to back is the Carbon Black Cloud. Still send telemetry, you can still remediate it remotely, but that's an integration with Workspace ONE. We also have a very tight integration with vSphere. So we are actually built into VMware tools. So you can do like a one-click deployment of the Carbon Black Cloud sensor into your virtualized workloads.
Yeah, that's huge. It's just the barrier to entry. I mean, 99% of our customers are also leveraging vSphere, right? So it's just as long as the product performs well, that's. I mean, and it sounds like by all intentions the approach is sound. That kind of thing can really be a difference maker.
Yeah, and the integration goes above and beyond just being built into VMware tools. We also provide visibility into vulnerabilities in the Carbon Black Cloud interface, but also in vCenter. So your IT admins, your VMware admins can see the level of vulnerability in their workloads in their environment. So they have that view into that as well. So it's empowering both the security and the VMware admins at the same time.
That's powerful. I want to say the first hypervisor, air quotes, antivirus that we talked about, the big thing was offloading a lot of the work to the hypervisor. Is that not the thing anymore? We just need to run this natively in the
DShield endpoint, right?
Yeah. You'd install this thing, but it wouldn't run the tools inside of the guest OS. It would run it on the hypervisor as a different service or something. Is that gone the way of the dodo, and that's no longer how we're handling this anymore as far as the integration with the hypervisor?
Yeah, I mean, there are antivirus products out there that are still doing it that way. We are not doing it that way. We are inside of the guest operating system, doing all the things that we've already talked about.
Okay.
And when you're the ones that are working in the hypervisor are some of those products that we already talked about that are just really not cutting the mustard, and that's why people are looking to companies like Carbon Black, because
sounds like let's try this. And
if you're not doing security well, and then you're not doing security well in the hypervisor, you're still not doing security well.
Right.
It doesn't doing it in the hypervisor doesn't make your product better. So
right. It sounds like the obsession with efficiency also took away some effectiveness of it too, and at that point, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
right.
I mean,
I tried something to figure out that it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not that it doesn't work. It's just those companies that are doing it in that way they're still trying to use that legacy mindset of the way that they were attacking a security problem, in scheduled scans and doing all that kind of stuff, where we can continue to operate in the way that we've always operated, in a very lightweight fashion, because we aren't doing any kind of scheduled scans. We are only focusing on process execution, and so we see those processes execute. We have reputations for them all, so if we see a known malicious process starting up, we can stop it immediately. Or if we see something that's known good, like PowerShell, and it comes up and we're like, okay, that's fine. Oh, wait, you're making network connections with a web client? Wait, what's going on here? Wait, you're starting up a command shell? Wait, you're touching these certificates? No. Okay, we're going to stop you now. So we can make those real-time decisions as these things are happening, and block those. And you're getting all of the things that we talked about. The signatures, the machine learning, the AMSI detections, the behavioral analysis. You're getting all of that because we're operating inside of that guest operating system.
Okay. So along the same kind of lines, are you inside of, you mentioned containers, are you inside of the container itself looking at what that specific container is doing? Or is that more along the lines of, I've seen this portion of this image of the container before, and I know that it's not going to do anything nefarious?
So the way it works right now with containers is we do container governance, or compliance governance. So we're looking at the Kubernetes configuration and the container configuration, and looking to see are they violating the policies that you have created. And so you can either alert or block an activity or block a configuration. So if somebody is using like enforce not root, or they're not using it, and the product sees that, it can either alert or block that container from spinning up. The next thing is we're doing image scanning. So we scan your repos, or can scan an individual image and identify all the vulnerabilities in it, and identify vulnerabilities and if they have fixes or not. And we identify all the CVEs and everything like that. So we see all that. That's where the product stands today. We are bringing in runtime preventative capabilities. So we will be looking at the networking communication from the containers initially. Okay. After that, we will start looking at the processes running inside of the containers and look and see when they are becoming malicious, or if they are malicious, and blocking them at that point.
Okay, that's cool.
That's right up your alley, Coz. That's a Matt Cozzolino question right there. I figured you'd be smiling at that.
Yeah, and so our container security piece, we're not tied to Tanzu. We're not eating our own. We of course will eat our own dog food, but we will operate anywhere where Kubernetes is. So anybody who's using Kubernetes, this is not a sensor in the container. It's a Kubernetes operator that we're using to collect all this data and take the actions that we're taking.
Nice.
Well, that's outstanding. And John, I hadn't thought about it, but it makes total sense. I guess it's probably the best way to describe it is next generation AV. I suppose, as much as you want to kind of hold your nose when you say AV, it's probably the best representation of it, at least to bridge the gap between the legacy mindset and then moving forward.
Yeah.
But it's been great for the past 15 years with Ivoxy to partner with VMware, and it's exciting to see that they continue to move into areas that are on the way up to prominence or already a prominence, and that's security and the protection against ransomware and things like that. And the in-stream process, I think, is really important versus the post. If you scan things post ransomware, guess what? You're crypto locked already. So
Right.
the in-stream is very, very important.
Yeah, and there's a couple things we haven't touched on yet in regards specifically to ransomware. So one of the policy actions that we have is to look for ransomware-like behavior. So we are looking, when you install a sensor, canary files are dropped in strategic locations in the file system. And if these files are manipulated in a certain way, the offending process can be terminated. So we can block ransomware early on via that. The other thing that ransomware always does is it wants to delete local backups because it doesn't want an easy mechanism for being able to recover out of ransomware. So we're looking at things like, is this process trying to delete shadow copies or even access VSS admin? Is it trying to delete time machine backups? Excuse me. And finally, looking at, is it trying to write to the master boot record? So we're looking at all of these different behaviors and able to identify ransomware early on and prevent encryption from taking place.
Yeah, we work with a lot of different layers and parts in the industry, and one of them that we have a lot of success in is the backup and recovery and DR. But that truly should be treated. It may be one of the top importance aspects, but it's also your last line of defense at that point
absolutely.
too. And that can burn a lot of cycles if you're constantly having to go back there. I mean, even if you have a complete full bulletproof backup, how much time and money have you lost should you have to go to that well even once, let alone repeatedly, to save it? So and that's where VMware's cloud disaster recovery service also comes into play. I mean, that's a great service in and of itself for
immutable backups in the cloud, and really get you back up and running very, very quickly. So looking at having a time savings there, it's a great disaster recovery as a service.
If you could pull the zeitgeist and do the old word, remember the word cloud? Before cloud meant what it needs now, it was the word cloud, and the bigger the word, the more it's used. I think ransomware and immutability might be two of the largest words in the last, 18 months or so.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because it's like you said, if your backups aren't any good, you're never going to recover. My wife's little tiny mom and pop shop got ransomwared. And they had backups, but were their backups good? Nope. So
that's a conversation I constantly have, is that backup at this point, the operation of backing data up, copying it from here to there, the simplest method, table stakes at this point. Every single product does it. Every single thing can do it. You could do it with a copy command.
Right.
But if the restore part of that is rickety, doesn't work, fails, your backup, as well as it worked on the way out, is useless. And it's that recovery and the protection of that data is of paramount importance. Yeah,
absolutely.
John, thank you so much for joining us today. I know your time is limited and valuable, and just I'm really appreciative of the conversation to kind of put a little color on something that I felt the same way about talking about backup in DR. I can't believe it's 2021. I'm somewhat excited about the advances in it. And here we are talking about traditional AV, right, and what it means today, and how it hasn't gotten any less important, and even opposite that, it's gotten critically important to protect things in stream. So thanks for giving us a little color on how Carbon Black achieves that.
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy.
And don't report us. Forget our names, all that kind of stuff.
Oh wait, I got it.
We aren't the Matts you're looking for. Right?
Can you recall emails? Does that work? I need to try
deleting emails after you send them, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe not. You might be getting a phone call. Sorry.
Oh. Well, thanks again, John. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Sure.
All right, Maddie, that wraps up another episode of Data Center Therapy. Yeah, if you've got questions about Carbon Black, VMware, and how that whole story plays out and want to talk about it further, reach out to your account manager. If you're new to Ivoxy, reach out to us at podcast@ivoxy.com, info@ivoxy.com, probably anything at ivoxy.com anyway will make its way to us. But
to someone.
Yeah, thanks again for listening to yet another episode of Data Center Therapy, y'all. Take care.